We're talking Notre Dame football on the Ourlads Football Network, the Ourlads Football YouTube Channel. And when we talk Notre Dame football, we're going to bring in this man, Kyle Kelly, who is with the On3 Network. Matter of fact, you can check it out at On3 Recruits on X, the football recruiting reporter for the Irish. How's it going, Kyle?
Going good as always. I'm pumped to do this. This is the third year in a row I've been on with you before the season, so it's always good to talk a little bit about the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, jog my memory a little bit before the season starts, and hopefully give some viewers some insight into this year's roster.
Yeah, because there are some things that are quite interesting regarding the depth chart that I want to pick your brain and find out just before this big Texas A&M game kicks off with the season, and definitely one of the top 3 to 5 games of the weekend, no question about it. So it's going to be a huge game, and really schedule-wise, Kyle, it's not really that bad a schedule for Notre Dame. It's pretty manageable once you get past Texas A&M, and that's how big this game is. Boy, if they can beat Texas A&M, that schedule is looking awfully nice, and I'd have a hard time believing that they would not end up making the 12-team playoff. They could still win it. They can still do it, even if they lose to Texas A&M, but I just think it's that much more easy, even if they lose one game, that they'd get in because they won on the road against an SEC team.
Yeah, an 11-1 Notre Dame team this year, especially with a win at Texas A&M, is absolutely a slam dunk college football playoff team. Probably a team that's also going to host a college football playoff home game. And one thing important to note about Notre Dame is, unlike the top 4 seeded, or I think maybe 5 conference champions, they're not guaranteed a bye week or anything like that. So the highest Notre Dame can be ranked is number 5 in the nation. So the great thing about Notre Dame, though, is they don't have to play a conference championship game. So they have an extra week to rest up compared to some of the other schools, like those top SEC and Big Ten programs. Honestly, all the Power 4 conferences, obviously they're going to have an extra game on their slate. And that, I think, is just an advantage for Notre Dame. It's why the former athletic director, Jack Swarbrick, kind of helped orchestrated the playoff this way. Obviously Notre Dame doesn't, get guaranteed home field advantage and everything like that. They got to win for it. But yeah, it sets up nicely for Notre Dame, especially this season. As you mentioned, the schedule is very manageable, especially after how Florida State looked in week 0 over in Ireland. That was shaping up to be Notre Dame's second toughest game and their most difficult home matchup. But now I think there's some people maybe feeling a little bit better about that Seminoles team that's going to be coming to South Bend in November. It's looking like Notre Dame's really got to go 11-1 this year to crash the party, and 2 losses could really make this season a little bit dicey if they want to keep things intact and have a chance to compete for a championship.
Before we get into the depth chart, there has been one significant change on the staff. So Notre Dame has themselves a new offensive coordinator. Talk a little bit about Mike Denbrock, what he brings to the table from Brian Kelly's staff.
Yeah, this is a guy that is coming to South Bend for, I like to call it his third tour at Notre Dame. He was there back in the early 2000s, I think again in the mid to late 2000s. And he kind of bounced around a little bit after his last Notre Dame tenure, ended up at Cincinnati as the offensive coordinator. That's where he crossed paths with Marcus Freeman when Freeman was the defensive coordinator with the Bearcats. Then when Brian Kelly went to LSU, he ended up picking up Denbrock to run the offense. And in year 2, everyone knows Jaden Daniels, Heisman Trophy winner, LSU top offense in college football. I mean, their yards per game and points per game were like significantly better than whoever the second best team was. Like that LSU offense was fantastic last season. And now, Notre Dame loses their offensive coordinator from last year, Jared Parker, who took the head coaching gig at Troy just before the end of after the regular season, right before the bowl game. And right away, Freeman zeroed in on the guy that he wanted, and that was Denbrock. And Denbrock's kind of called this his last stop. He's not a young spring chicken or whatever you want to call it anymore. He's a veteran in this industry, and he's a guy that has a lot of passion for Notre Dame. His family loves Notre Dame. He's from Michigan, so I think he feels pretty comfortable about where he's at to potentially finish his college football career and ultimately kind of reinvigorate this Notre Dame offense. I think over the last 2 seasons under Marcus Freeman, both years have been pretty mediocre offensively.
Yeah.
So they're really looking for some new life, some new energy. They got a lot of new players in order to do that. And hopefully, the future of the Notre Dame offense is going to look a lot better than in years past.
Yeah, we'll start with the Ourlads Notre Dame depth chart. And if you see any corrections, please let us know. We'll get right to updating them. But starting on offense, and to tell you the truth, I am going to go straight to the offensive line, because that seems to be the big story with the fact that just looking at this depth chart, if it's correct, it says that there are no upperclassmen on the offensive line for the Irish. Is that accurate?
Yeah, it is. I'm looking through things there. I mean, Billy Schrouth, Ashton Craig, and Emil Wagner, the starting center to right tackle. I mean, all those guys are true juniors.
Yeah.
But
sure.
I mean, the big storyline entering Texas A&M is only 6 combined starts. And the big stat that our beat reporters at Blue and Gold uncovered this week is I'm pretty sure Notre Dame only has starters listed in their media guide, or it's really only readily available back until 1987. So we're talking about 40 years, and within those 40 years, Notre Dame has never started the season without a senior on their offensive line. So definitely a very young offensive line here in year 3 under Marcus Freeman. Joe Walt and Blake Fisher, both going to the NFL, have a lot to do with that. And then, pretty much from there, all the young guys just emerged. They had 2 guards last season, Rocco Spindler and Pat Coogan, who started on the interior of that O-line. But they got beat out. Billy Schrouth, dating back to last year, once Rocco Spindler got injured, Schrouth kind of took over for him. And then Sam Pendleton, the true sophomore, redshirt freshman, beat out. I mean, technically, Spindler and Coogan, they were all battling for that left guard position, with Schrouth kind of winning it. Coming out of last season, he had that position cemented pretty easily, pretty comfortably entering spring ball in the season this year. So it was really honestly, it was like a 2-man competition at left guard between Rocco and Pat Coogan, and then Sam Pendleton really emerged this summer. And then the other storyline there in terms of the youth of the offensive line, the starting right tackle, Emil Wagner, true junior, redshirt sophomore, he beat out his 5th or 6th year guy, graduate student, Tosh Baker. And when Charles Jogusah, the starting left tackle, went down towards the beginning of fall camp, they slotted Tosh Baker then on the left side, but then it only took a handful of days for Anthony Knapp, the true freshman, to beat him out. So
wow,
that's a really, really long way, and probably much more detailed than necessary, but probably a good way to break down how they got there and where they're at heading into College Station in week 1.
So that's even big too, that Notre Dame is going to be starting a true freshman at left tackle at College Station on opening day, that madhouse. Throw in the fact that, correct me if I'm wrong, but Lambert was a higher recruit than Knapp. Is that correct?
Yeah, no, that is. We kind of knew the Notre Dame, offensive line, there would be some spots to fill this season. And I kind of projected like Kirby Lambert as one of those guys that could come crash the party. At On3, our scouting and rankings team considered him a 5-star. So, and he's a really good football player. But he enrolled in June. It was evident pretty early that he just wasn't as up to speed as Anthony Knapp, which is no surprise since Knapp enrolled in the spring. But I mean, the fascinating thing about Knapp is, he's like 6'4", 315 pounds. You don't really, or he's supposedly around 315. I think he's listed on the roster as a little bit lighter. But, Knapp's not really your prototypical left tackle. But he was the one that really emerged. And, he was a consensus, I think, low 4-star, high 3-star. I don't have it right in front of me.
Wow.
A lot of the industry did not rank Anthony Knapp as high as what we did on On3. On3 is a top 100 prospect and a 4-star recruit. So On3 really liked him, but the consensus in the industry here was not as high on Knapp. But all the reviews coming out of preseason camp are extremely encouraging. He's locked down that left side of the line. I mean, pretty much beat out a graduate guy.
Yeah.
In a few practices. So, yeah, even though Lambert was a highly rated guy, a guy that I thought would probably get a nod at some point this season, and he very well still could be.
Sure.
It's really been Knapp as the one to emerge.
Okay, then 2 more things in the offensive line before we go. Where's the biggest concern do you think they have with the line?
Just because we haven't seen Anthony Knapp play against college competition, he's played in spring ball and practice and everything like that. But even in spring ball, he was working at center a lot. So he didn't really transition to a full-time left tackle until this preseason. So I think the biggest concern is on that left side where they're going to have 2 first-time starters, both guys that are super young too. There's a real debate that I think offensive line is the weakest part on this team, and that is entering this year, and a lot of it is just because of the inexperience. So that's one position group, and the side of the ball I'm going to be or side of the offensive line that I'm going to be watching closest in College Station is that left side with 2 guys that have hardly have any college football snaps, let alone starts.
Freshman and redshirt. Wow, at Notre Dame. Okay, so then give me, would Knapp be it or Lambert? Give me the one guy that you believe, or a couple of them, that you believe have the biggest upside overall on the line.
The biggest upside, Emil Wagner and Kirby Lambert are probably the 2 that I'm thinking. I mean, both those guys were 5-star guys. Wagner has really had a lot of trouble keeping on weight, which kind of held him out from playing, at Notre Dame. He was a former high school wide receiver early on in his high school career before he made the switch to offensive line. So now he's really going to be able to put some film out there for the NFL evaluators to see how he holds up. He's a great athlete. He was like a 3-sport guy in high school. He was a phenomenal track and field athlete. Now he's going to get his chance to play and kind of work him into the conversation to be an NFL draft choice. Obviously, Kirby Lambert just got there, so it's all potential with him. We really haven't seen a whole lot. But honestly, the guy that is probably got the highest ceiling and has the chance to go the furthest is Charles Jagusaw, who is unfortunately out for the year with a torn pectoral injury and required surgery. And, we won't be seeing him till next season. But he's a guy that was already on the radar of NFL teams, another former 5-star recruit. So it's even going to be more fascinating next season what happens, especially if Anthony Knapp plays well at left tackle. And because all these guys are relatively young guys, there's a chance we could be seeing the same starting offensive line coming out of this season going into next.
And Jagusaw, what happened? What was the injury?
Pectoral injury.
Okay. All right. Now, let's take a look at the rest of the offense. And Riley Leonard, of course, is playing quarterback at Notre Dame, big position, and a couple of ACC quarterbacks over the last couple of years, transfers. Hartman didn't really go as planned. Now it's Riley Leonard's opportunity. Of course, Leonard brings a little bit more in the ground game, a little bit more type of well-rounded quarterback in that respect. Definitely, one of those college quarterbacks that, whether or not you want to call him a winner, whatever you want to call him, the kid just really elevates his team and has done that at Duke. But now it's Notre Dame. So Duke, let me see what I could do to elevate these guys. But now he's at Notre Dame where there's a lot of big guys. How's he fitting in?
Fitting in great. I mean, the reviews have been phenomenal in terms of like the leader and the personality and presence he gives in the locker room. I mean, all these guys love Riley Leonard. Like when we've met with players during our media availability, I mean, no one's going to have anything bad to say about the quarterback, but you can tell like they genuinely mean it. Like when they talk about Riley Leonard, like he's just one of those guys that fits in well. He was a great addition, and not only to what he brings on the field at Notre Dame, but also just a cultural fit of Notre Dame. And I think Sam Hartman had some similar qualities, but I think it just comes more natural to Riley. I think right from the start when he got to South Bend, he just gelled with those guys right away. I mean, it was pretty much a foregone conclusion once he entered the portal that he was going to end up in Notre Dame. And, he's a Christian guy, really, leans into that aspect and, also loves like the history and tradition part of Notre Dame. So he's been a great fit for what Notre Dame's needed on and off the field. And now the big thing now is just it's obviously already paid off the field, but I think we need to see it on the gridiron.
Okay. And then now I see that they only have Angeli as the backup. So is that the case? Is that if anything were to happen to either one of those guys, does that mean they'd be in a lot of trouble? And tell us a little bit about Angeli as the backup.
No, I mean, they have 4 scholarship quarterbacks on this roster, which Notre Dame really hasn't been able to say in a long time.
Okay.
And the thing is about these 4 scholarship quarterbacks is they're all pretty dang good. They have a very competitive room. Steve Angeli is the backup. Then behind him is a true sophomore, redshirt freshman, Kenny Minchie. And then true freshman, who they signed out of the 2024 cycle, CJ Carr. Highly recruited guy, grandson of Lloyd Carr, who had very outstanding spring. Also follow that up with a great camp. Notre Dame behind the scenes is very excited about what the potential of that program is going to look like when CJ Carr gets there and takes it over. But yeah, this was pretty much as soon as they got Riley Leonard, they tried to dress it up as a quarterback competition, but everyone knew that Leonard was going to get the starting job. But Steve Angeli, like, even though he never got maybe as realistic of a shot to win that job as he probably should have, he's still a pretty good quarterback in his own right. He made his first start last year in the Oregon State game in the Tony the Tiger Sun Bowl. Had a great performance. I mean, Notre Dame laid down the beating on the Beavers. Oregon State was going through a transition with a new head coach and everything like that. So it was a tough opponent for Oregon State at the end of the year. But Steve Angeli came in. He played extremely well for a guy that only played mop-up duty for most of his Notre Dame career. And I think if you ask like most realistic Notre Dame fans, like, people wouldn't be surprised if Steve Angeli even started a game this year, just because Riley Leonard is like, I want to go on. I don't think it's fair to say he's injury prone, but he puts himself in harm's way a little bit than he should have. He's one of those guys, like, he's a quarterback, but he has like a running back and linebacker mentality. Like, he's going to take the hits. He's going to run the football. So, and wouldn't be surprised to see Riley get banged up throughout the year. But even if he does, and I think Notre Dame feels confident enough in Steve Angeli that he can win them football games. And if something crazy would happen where Angeli also was unable to play this year, I think they're confident enough in what they have behind those guys and Minchie and Carr that, this season wouldn't necessarily go off the rails.
So right now, Angeli's the number 2, but what do you think will happen? And again, we have no idea what will happen this year. Let's say Riley Leonard plays every game. Mm-hmm. Next year, Angeli comes back with Carr. Who's the leader to start next year?
Yeah, I mean, as of right now, Angeli, Minchie, and Carr, will all have the chance to compete for that starting gig. I think it's only fair to put Angeli in pole position just because he's a veteran guy, and has made a start at Notre Dame, and he's really paid his dues. But I wouldn't be surprised if he kind of sees the writing on the wall in the offseason because CJ Carr is coming along and he's coming along fast. And I think next season, we could have our first true quarterback competition at Notre Dame in quite some time. Like this past year, everyone knew it was Riley Leonard. The year before, everyone knew it was Sam Hartman. And even the year before that, they tried to make it a Drew Pine, Tyler Buckner battle. But everyone knew that Tommy Rees, Tyler Buckner was his guy. So it's been a while. And even before that, they had Jack Cohn, who they brought in as a transfer. So I'm sure I can keep jogging my memory to go further back there. But, going into next offseason, I think it's only fair to give that starting position, the pole position to Steve Angeli. But I think he could have a pretty hard time pulling off CJ Carr, especially if he continues on this upward trajectory.
Okay, the backfield, no more Estime. That's a big loss. So Love got his feet wet last year. Price as well. Is Love clearly the number 1 guy?
I wouldn't say clearly. Notre Dame, I think, lists him on their official depth chart, which I'm going to reference here, as or. So, start Jeremiah Love or Jadarian Price. But I think coming out of camp, Love is the lead back is how I would phrase it. A guy that's going to play a lot of first and second down. And Love also wants to try and get in on the third down as well and take a shot in pass protection and also try to catch some passes. He might even play out of the slot at times this year. He's a really effective pass catcher. But he is – if there was a handful of guys that I had to, mention that had a fantastic offseason, he would be toward the top of the list. He gained, I think, about 10, 15 pounds, still has stayed as fast as he was before, if not even faster. And he's ready to go. I mean, it's like takeoff time for Jeremiah Love. Like when Audric Estime was a sophomore, it was kind of the same way. He got his feet wet as a freshman, and then in 2022, it was sort of go time. Just the one thing is how is that offensive line going to hold up in front of them at the start of the year? Because the test that they have week 1 against that Texas A&M defensive line is a very, very tall task. I did some deep dives into the type of talent they have on that D line, and it's a lot of former 5-star guys and a lot of potential NFL draft picks, which is not a coincidence that it ends up that way. So we might not see Jeremiah Love break off for a big game, and he might have some trouble moving the chains against Texas A&M in week 1. But I think as the season goes on, since this is a young group, they're going to only continue to get better, and you're just going to see Jeremiah Love continue to ascend. I think Jadarian Price is a guy that they still really like. He came in as a freshman, had a great spring, but tore his Achilles in the fall, was out for the season. He got back into the fold last year and had some really nice plays. So he's a great compliment to Jeremiah Love. And, behind that, those two, it's kind of a drop-off. So I expect those two guys to get the bulk of the carries, and, they're both going to bring a different dimension to the Irish offense.
Okay, and the receiving room is definitely in flux, but let's talk about Mitchell Evans first, because we know he's looked at as one of the top tight end prospects in college football, and this is Notre Dame, and he's a tight end, so he's going to get there'll be a lot of scouts checking out what he can do this season. So how's he looking? How's he feeling?
Yeah, coming off a torn ACL that he suffered in Week 9 on October 28th against Pittsburgh, and from all indication, he's had no setbacks, and he's going to be full steam ahead going into College Station at Week 1. He's starting to take some contact in practice. He's without a brace. Now, I'm a little bit skeptical to see how much runway they give him in Week 1, but from everything they're saying is that he should really have, he shouldn't be held back at all.
Okay.
In addition to being our recruiting reporter at Blue and Gold, during the offseason, I kind of get involved in some of the NFL draft coverage just because I enjoy that sort of thing. And, I've noticed a lot. There's like these 3 tight ends this year in college football that are like the top 3 guys. I think Loveland from Michigan is one. I know Georgia, Oscar Delp is a pretty good ball player. And then there's Mitchell Evans. And based on some of my research earlier this week, I think Evans has a chance to be a day 2 NFL draft pick. Now, a lot of that's going to depend on how he looks coming off this torn ACL. But Notre Dame's passing offense was borderline inept last season. Like, they struggled. And Evans was a big bright spot. He was probably one of the singular reasons they beat Duke and escaped Durham with a victory on the road last season. And his stretch mid-year before he got hurt was pretty impressive. He's starting to come along, like, no drop-off to Michael Mayer, which I think if you would have told us that before the season, we would have been pretty surprised. So if you could stay healthy, he's a guy that has a chance to win that. I think it's the Mackey Award. Is that the one for the tight ends? Yeah, win the Mackey, be a candidate for that. And, another guy that, once again, coming down the pipeline from Notre Dame and the great tight ends.
Okay, at wide receiver, there are some transfers coming in, and this is good news, especially with Chris Mitchell. So, is Mitchell? Is he the one that really has a chance to be like the main guy, just based on what he did last year? Even though it was at a lower level, it's group of 5, it wasn't, didn't play the big boys each week, but still very productive. Collins comes in from Clemson. So it looks like a pretty nice room. But again, it's, you got some young guys and you got some transfers.
Yeah. They took 3 transfers this offseason at the wide receiver position. They weren't messing around. Like, they knew their depth chart was way too thin last season. Like, the best receiver on that roster last year ended up being a walk-on lacrosse player, Jordan Faison, who really came on towards the end of last season. And it was pretty evident coming out of that year that they needed some top guys and guys that could give them depth. And Bo Collins and Chris Mitchell and Jaden Harrison, 3 transfers, were the guys they targeted. Now, Harrison's more of an elite kick returner, and he's really come on as a slot receiver at Notre Dame. But in terms of the guys who have maybe the chance to be that number 1 wide receiver for Notre Dame, like the guy, I think you look at Chris Mitchell. I think you look at Bo Collins. Both those guys, have been talked about, as the guys that can emerge to be that top pass catcher in this offense. Another one is Jaden Thomas, to be like that number 1, like that big body guy that you think of as a true number 1 wide receiver. But the other guy that I'm really going to be watching is Jaden Greathouse. He looks really, really good after dealing with a hamstring injury for most of last season, which really slowed what was a great start for him. He had 2 touchdowns in the first game of the season, and he just looks faster, more experienced. And I think Notre Dame could have a real NFL player at wide receiver on their hands in Greathouse, which they probably really haven't been able to say in years past.
Wow. So it sounds like to me, because this is a question I'm going to ask you, and I might as well ask you now on offense. It sounds like to me that if I asked you to give me a breakout candidate or 2, you would say Jeremiah Love and Jaden Greathouse.
So with these breakout questions, I'm a little bit more conservative because, in my mind, Jeremiah Love and Jaden Greathouse, they already broke out last year. They impacted Notre Dame's offense. So, in terms of guys that could really elevate their game and like kind of take over and be the guys in the Notre Dame offense, I think I would go with Love. I think I would go with Greathouse. But if we had to go like a little bit deeper to have a guy that could truly break out, I would look to the tight end room where there's a guy named Cooper Flanagan. Him and Eli Raridan are battling for the number 2 spot. Flanagan's had a great camp. He's a true sophomore. He's really impressed. So I think that's another guy that we're going to be talking about in a couple years as that next great Notre Dame tight end.
Awesome. The more candidates, the better. Okay. Defense. Now, there's a lot of questions on offense, but the defense, this is how Notre Dame is going to win a national championship. This is one of the best defenses in college football. Let's start with that back end because Benjamin Morrison, boy, this year, we've already talked about it on some of the other shows, some of the scouting shows, but this year, I don't think I'm going to recall when I've seen 3 better cornerback candidates come out in the same year, which is most likely going to happen. That could all be top 5, top 7 draft picks. I mean, these guys, and Morrison, obviously one of them. And then Watts, of course, at safety is another big-time player. So, yeah, talk about how good this secondary is.
Well, it's crazy to think that Notre Dame has the reigning Bronco Nagurski Award winner for the best defender in college football. And not only is he not the best player on his defense, but he's not the best player in his position group. Because that's Benjamin Morrison, who is kind of a freak. Like, Notre Dame's never been known to be a great school developing cornerbacks. I did some research on that earlier this offseason, and I think like Kavari Russell was like the only top draft pick like in the 21st century. I think maybe they had a couple other guys early on in the 2000s, but Benjamin Morrison is just on his own island, pun intended, because he's a guy that Golden, the defensive coordinator, Al Golden, has no issues with playing on one-on-one. He can lock down his side. By no mistake was a freshman All-American. Kind of leveled out a little bit last year, but like you look at the stats that Marvin Harrison Jr. recorded against against Notre Dame. Like he was pretty much a non-factor both years with Benjamin Morrison on the field. And you also got to give credit to Cam Hart, who ended up becoming a 4th-round draft pick by the Chargers. But Morrison has been outstanding. He has made pretty much every preseason All-American list that I've seen. And as you said, he's going to be vying to be one of those top 3 cornerbacks taken. And I think he's going to give a run to Will Johnson to be one of the potentially the top guy coming off the board in the spring. And as for Watts, it feels pretty good to have that safety room shored up. Like, some of the past years, there's been a lot of question marks in the safety room, and Xavier Watts, a wide receiver recruit, finally emerges late in his Notre Dame career. Had I think 7 interceptions, which tied for the lead in all college football. Then they have 2 sophomores in that secondary that are coming along nicely, Adon Schuler and Christian Gray. I think Christian Gray, maybe not the next Benjamin Morrison, but is a guy that has to be on NFL radars in a couple of years. He is that good. He's a guy that I think Notre Dame can feel similarly comfortable about leaving him one-on-one in coverage.
Okay.
And Adon Schuler, like, even though he's a true sophomore, didn't see a ton of snaps this year. Like he's another one of those guys with Jeremiah Love that's made a really big jump from year 1 to year 2.
And then I see Jordan Clark is here, one of the transfers starting at nickel, and it was thought that Hurd would be in the starting rotation. He still might. I don't know, but you've got 3 freshmen there, 3 true freshmen, and 2 transfers. So talk about Clark. Is that a surprise at all that he's starting?
No, it was kind of fascinating the way Notre Dame did this in the portal because they went after Clark, who was right away going to be that guy that they kind of like to replace Thomas Harper at the nickel position, and then they added Rod Hurd, who's played a lot of spots in the secondary at Northwestern. but he was brought in to compete with Adon Schuler for that safety position, that second safety opposite of Watts. But Schuler's had such a nice offseason that, like, Rod Hurd's kind of in this spot where it's like, well, Schuler's really won this thing. So it's like, how many snaps is he going to take away from Schuler? Is he going to? I think he's even listed as Xavier Watts' backup, and they can't keep Jordan Clark out there every play as a nickel. But then the backup nickel during camp we've seen was Jaden Ausberry, a sophomore linebacker. So it was, it's kind of fascinating where Rod Hurd sort of ends up. He could play corner too. So he's a guy that Notre Dame really targeted uh, for depth. I would say, like, he can play a number of different positions in that secondary. And I think like last year they also had a defensive back transfer from Rhode Island, Antonio Carter, who I think they thought would be a guy to like kind of fill some gaps, but it never really came together for him. But I think there's enough confidence in Rod Hurd that if you need to put him in any of those positions as secondary, he's a smart guy. He's coming from Northwestern. He goes to Notre Dame, obviously, that he can hold it together and be a serviceable part of that team.
Which one of these freshmen might get some playing time? Moore, Hobbs, or Locker?
It's Leonard Moore, the guy that we're really looking at. He is right from the get-go hit the ground running when he enrolled in the summer, and behind Morrison and Christian Gray, there's only one upperclassman, and Jaden Mickey. Besides that, it's all the young guys. And Benjamin Morrison even told reporters pretty candidly this offseason in fall camp that he thinks that Leonard Moore could be better than what he was at Notre Dame. Now, Morrison's maybe piping him up a little bit, but Leonard Moore has looked really good. I think he's a guy that you can feel confident about going in to play there. Like, I think he has the trust of the coaching staff, which is really important as a freshman. But it's still, this isn't to take anything away from Carson Hobbs or Kenny Urlacher, because even though that both those guys are freshmen as well, they both had their own flashes during camp, and I wouldn't be surprised towards the end of the year if they're putting the game in spots to see some significant, some meaningful snaps for Notre Dame.
On this side of the ball, the one question would be the linebacker crew. Of course, Leofau gone, Bertrand gone. Kaiser's coming back. So how does that look? The newbies is taking over.
It's a work in progress. It's a little bit different than when they had Bertrand and Leofau there, just because those guys were both veterans. And Leofau, I think he went on late day 2 in the NFL draft, and Bertrand was a draft choice as well. So obviously the NFL viewed those guys pretty highly, so that just shows you how important they were to the Notre Dame defense. But the guys that are replacing them, Jack Kaiser's going to be, he has a full-time role now. He's a 6-year guy. There's a lot of confidence in what he can do. When he played last year, he was a playmaker. I don't think anyone at Notre Dame is concerned about Jack Kaiser playing linebacker. He is the heart and soul of the defense. He's going to be their green dot guy this year. But then at the middle linebacker position, it's 2 highly touted recruits, Drake Bone and Kingston Villiamawasa. I think we're still waiting for Drake Bone to kind of take that next step. Drake is in such an unfair position because he has to be the guy to replace the guy. Like, J.D. Bertrand was the heart and soul of the defense the previous 2 years, and now it's like, everyone wanted to replace Bertrand because, like, there were some things that they didn't like about him, whether it be in the pass game, wasn't as dynamic. And, now Drake Bowen is going to be that guy. And I think a lot of Notre Dame fans are going to realize how much Bertrand meant to that defense. But Bowen is still a really dang good football player in his own right.
Okay.
He's only a true sophomore, though. So, there's going to be some growing pains. I wouldn't say that it's going to be, even though I said, like, Notre Dame is going to miss J.D. Bertrand, I don't think it's going to be, like 2 or 3 steps back. Like, I think Bowen's going to be able to do enough to make things look pretty normal. And then coming in behind him is Kingston Viliamu-Asa, was a top 50 recruit. Rivals rated him a 5-star, and he looks the part and he plays the part. Like, it's because Kingston Viliamu-Asa that linebackers coach Max Bola is really going to be rotating like 6 guys at linebacker this year, along with Jalen Sneed and Jay Nosberry, who play like this rover position. Those 6 guys are all going to play significant snaps this season. You're going to see all of them on the field, different combinations at different times, week 1 in College Station.
And Sneed, Jalen Sneed?
He is the one that Notre Dame, everyone from Notre Dame is waiting to break out. He was another former 5-star guy. Notre Dame pulled out of Hilton Head, South Carolina. You know, he's had some really high moments at Notre Dame, but he's never really been able to piece it all together. And it seems like in the spring it was starting to click for him. And, you know, I can't really say a whole lot about what he did this summer. I think he kind of just held steady. And now everyone just waiting for it to green light to turn on, for the light switch to flip on game days. And I think that step and, you know, makes this, you know, I think like when you talk about Notre Dame defense being like really good or great, like Jalen Sneed is one of those guys that could be the reason Notre Dame's defense is great or elite.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, up front, this might be the best defensive line in the nation. So first start with Howard Cross, because that was such a big gift when Cross decided to stay another season. Is he the leader up there?
You would think so, but then Riley Mills was named the captain in the offseason, which kind of caught me a little off guard. Or I shouldn't say I keep referring to the offseason. I guess technically it's still the offseason because we haven't started games yet, but a lot of this has been preseason camp, or is how Notre Dame calls it, fall camp. They named Cross they named Mills captain based on a player vote about a week and a half ago. And I thought it was going to be Cross. Some of my colleagues thought it was going to be Mills. Mills ended up becoming the guy. But I think when people think about the face of the defensive line, the leader, I think it's Howard Cross. Obviously, second team preseason All-American. And I'm not going to compare him to Aaron Donald. He's not Aaron Donald. He can't make – I don't think he's going to make that type of impact or come close to it at the pro level. But he's similar in terms of he's a smaller guy and he's very effective. Howard Cross was a big reason why Notre Dame was able to take that jump last year on defense, obviously becoming a second-team All-American. So he is the face of that unit. Riley Mills is another guy that has made Bruce Feldman's Freaks list a couple of the last few years. Big body guy. You know, is like your prototypical 3 technique, and who everyone was kind of similar to Jalen Sneed this year. Like entering last year, like, you know, Riley Mills had showed up in games for Notre Dame and like played well and everything. But I think last year all started to finally come together for Riley Mills. And instead of testing to see if you could get into the NFL as a draft pick, or maybe, you know, make his mark as an undrafted free agent, go that direction, he chose to run it back at Notre Dame. So there's going to be, you know, a lot of veteran experience on the starting interior, and the edge positions are the same way. Defensive end with Jordan Botello and RJ Oben. Botello plays that Viper position, which, if anyone remembers Isaiah Foskey at Notre Dame, that was the one they had play that for a long time before Botello ended up replacing him last year. And Botello's like, he's fine. Like there's not a whole lot of knocks on his game. Like, he's a pretty serviceable player that you can win football games with. It's just like he doesn't make that impact that Isaiah Foskey made. Now, it's not really fair to compare Botello to Foskey, since Foskey ended up leaving Notre Dame as like one of the program's all-time sack leaders. But I would just like to see Botello be a little bit more involved on third down and pass rush. And that's where I think he can have that impact this year. He's always been a great run defender. So that's what we're looking at with Jordan Botelho this year. There's a lot of optimism. And ironically, this is a very optimistic show because it's the preseason. It always is this way. We're always talking up these guys before they start the season. But I think Botelho is a guy that can really piece together as well. And just finishing my thought on R.J. Oben, they brought him in from Duke this season to play the strong side defensive end. A lot of people want to compare him to Javonte Jean-Baptiste, who Notre Dame went the same direction with last year, to bringing him in as a transfer from Ohio State to play that strong side defensive end. Javonte Jean-Baptiste was probably, besides Xavier Watts and even maybe Howard Cross, was the probably single biggest surprise on that defense last season, where he kind of came in as like a guy, like a veteran who had that potential and upside, but he actually tapped into it, made himself an NFL draft pick who made a roster in Washington. So now they're looking for R.J. Oben to kind of play the same role. I don't think he's going to be as effective, but he's another good piece on that Notre Dame defensive line.
So who do you think is going to end up? Is there a clear, when the season's over, a clear guy that you think will end up leading the team in sacks?
It's really hard to guess because our beat writer Jack Sobel posed this question on our message board. I think it was over the weekend, and he gave a bunch of options, and I didn't see Jalen Sneed on there, so I was just joking. I threw Jalen Sneed's name out because they've been known to line Jalen Sneed up off the edge to rush the passer, so that's like a sleeper pick to lead the team in sacks, but it feels like anyone you pick is like a real sleeper pick because another guy that they like as a pass rusher is Boubacar Traore, who backs up Jordan Botelho. You know, like I said, like Botelho's never been known to be a real big sack guy. Maybe it's this year that Riley Mills, breaks through and makes a lot of those stops in the backfield. You don't really think of like interior D linemen really being the ones to lead the team in sacks. So I have a really hard time answering that question. So I'm just going to, I'm going to give.
You kind of have.
Sneed. Yeah. So that is like one of the top 3 storylines this year for me is who's going to lead the sacks and how the pass rush is going to turn out because it seems like last year was pretty evenly distributed.
Is there, lastly, on defense, is there someone up front that is like that next guy? You mentioned one of them, Traore, Boubacar.
Well, Traore, yep. And they've had a couple of guys come along in camp. Gabriel Rubio, who's not listed on the depth chart because he's out with an injury. He's been a guy that's been a stalwart type player. He's kind of come in there and held down the foundation and played a lot of meaningful snaps for Notre Dame. But he's going to be out for part of the year. Jason Onye is another veteran who I think everyone's hoping steps up and plays well when Howard Cross and Riley Mills can't play. But the other young guy that's really emerged and come along is Armel Mukum. No one really saw that coming this summer. He missed a spring with a shoulder injury, but he's looked great in fall camp. And the last name I'll mention is Bryce Young, who's a freshman, but he's a freak of nature. He's like 6'7" and probably right around 260 pounds right now. And he's the son of former NFL Hall of Famer Bryant Young. So he has the pedigree. He looks the part. He had a pretty tremendous ascension as a high school senior. So I wouldn't be surprised if by the end of the year that we are starting to see Bryce Young play some snaps. And I can't end my conversation on defense, assuming we're done talking about the defense, without mentioning Josh Burnham, another guy on that D-line who is a junior, but I think could be like similarly to offense, like the guys that I pick. It's like true breakout candidate. Like I think Burnham sort of started to emerge last year, but I think he's a guy that I wouldn't be surprised by the end of the year if when Notre Dame rolls out their first team defense, if Burnham's getting the nod ahead of Oben. That's my bold prediction.
Okay, so Burnham is a breakout candidate.
Yeah.
Any more? On defense? Any other breakout candidates on defense besides Burnham?
Well, Christian Gray would be my other thought. Him and Jay Nosbury, both those guys played snaps last year, though. So if you want to dig a little bit deeper, I like Leonard Moore, too. I think, like, similar to Benjamin Morrison, like, when he was a freshman, he started and he played a lot of games for Notre Dame. Christian Gray was more of a rotational guy, and I think that's what Leonard Moore will be. But I still think he'll be an impact player for Notre Dame this year, and a guy that going into next year, once Benjamin Morrison enters the draft, that we'll be talking about Christian Gray and Leonard Moore being Notre Dame's top 2 corners. And still Notre Dame having one of the best cornerback rooms in all college football.
How's the kicking game? They got a new kicker, right? New place kicker?
Yeah, it's interesting because Mitch Jeter is I think he's only missed 3 career kicks in his college career. He's a veteran, came from South Carolina. All 3 of those kicks were from 50-plus. Even if I don't have that stat totally correct, he was pretty much on the money all of his college career, one of the best kickers in all of last season in terms of percentage. But in fall camp, I wouldn't describe him as overly consistent. I think he's had his ups and downs. So that's another one of those things that we're going to be really keeping a close eye on this this season, is to see if he can kind of put it together and if he can be the guy that, when Notre Dame got out of the portal, that they sort of expected to, once again shore up the kicking game this season.
Well, there might be some big kicks that'll be needed. So we'll see if that happens, if he can come through. As a fan, you don't want to see that, but it may happen. So especially, who knows, maybe it happens this week. So give me a prediction. What are you feeling? Last year, 10-3. What are you feeling this year? Playoff team? Anything more than that?
I probably feel best. So in years past, I'm always like optimistic, and I end up being let down. So I'm like kind of focusing on maybe being a little bit more pessimistic and being surprised. Yeah.
Okay.
But with that said, I'll stick with my preseason prediction of 11-1, Notre Dame to make the playoff, host a home game. But I'm really intrigued to see how Notre Dame puts it together on the road this year, going to Texas A&M, and if even if they do lose to the Aggies week 1, can they still piece it all together?
Yeah.
And win 11 games straight? Like, that's still, even though as difficult as this schedule is, as easy as the schedule is, like, that's still a pretty difficult task, especially when you're ending the year at USC. So no one knows what USC is going to look like at the end of the year,
No.
but it'll be a tough game. I mean, it always is as a rivalry game. So I'm going to go with 11-1. I probably feel better about 10-2, like I said, trying to play that role. But I'm really buying into Notre Dame this year. I named Marcus Freeman my Coach of the Year candidate in our who I projected to win the Coach of the Year. So I'm really leaning into Marcus Freeman in this program, taking the next step forward. And pretty much the reason why is I think it comes down to a veteran defense and 2 experienced coordinators that they have now. And I think that's going to be a really big difference in this season.
Yeah, again, and we kicked off the show by talking about that's why that Texas A&M game is so important. Win that game, and then you don't have to run the table. If you stub your toe, you're still in the playoffs, and then you go from there, and we'll see what happens. I mean, Louisville is not going to be easy. Even Miami of Ohio the week before, they might be the best MAC team. Not that Notre Dame typically has issues with MAC teams, but I mean, there've been some close ones. Had that Toledo game a few years ago.
Yeah,
close.
I was wondering if you're going to mention that when you mentioned the close games.
So you never know. Especially, I think the quarterback Gabbard, I think, is 25 years old.
Yeah.
So, and he might be the best quarterback in the MAC. So yeah, I mean, going to Jeff Brom's Purdue and Georgia Tech, they're going to be better, I think, than people think. I don't think that win was a fluke. So it is what it is, but that's college football. It's what's going to be so fun about it. And sounds like, at least talking to you, this should be a real fun year covering the Irish, especially because we have ourselves as real as a playoff system as college football can get. We've been waiting for this all our lives. So we'll see how it works. And I look forward to talking to you definitely during the season, Kyle. In the meantime, just want to remind everybody again, it's at On3 Recruits on X. And where do you want to send them as far as website to go check out Blue and Gold, the Blue and Gold On3 recruiting service?
Well, yeah, I would just go blueandgold.com. That's our On3 Notre Dame website. We have 30 fan sites at On3. We're the next big thing. We're On3 is really on the cutting edge here, and we're really proud and excited about the staff we have across the whole network. And good thing is for depending on when you post it and who's viewing it, we have a great special going on, 50% off and annual subscription for your first year. So use that code kickoff24, really get you hooked up with a lot of insider access and all those features that we have over at Blue and Gold. So really excited about the season, really excited what we're building over at our Notre Dame site.
50% off. Those are for new subscribers with the code kickoff24.
Yep, that's the way to do it.
Excellent. Kyle, thank you. Enjoy the season, and hopefully we'll talk before the playoffs, before Notre Dame goes to the playoffs, if all goes well.
Hopefully we're talking about it.
Absolutely.